heart didn't want to leave. And I was still reluctant to even let her know what was going on down here. I'm still not sure that I can trust that, right? I don't know that I can trust my feelings. We prayed together. She prayed first and then I was praying and I was like, I gotta let her know like something about that I have some feelings for her, right?
Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Lindsay and on this channel I like to share with you guys encouraging biblical stories as well as stories of people who God is leading or has led into kingdom marriage. So today I have my friend Mitch Wallace and he is sharing about his now engagement and how God has brought him and his fiancée to this point. So please grab a cup of tea or do whatever you want to do and sit back and enjoy. And I really pray that God blesses you with the stories that are shared today. Mitch and I have been friends for a solid 10 years now, I'd say. We met in 2014. We've just had a developing friendship since then, and it's been really good to grow together in that time. Now, today we are
Mm.
talking once again about kingdom marriages. Is there anything that you would like to share to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently a web developer slash YouTuber slash musician based in Melbourne. And yeah, God gave me literally dozens of details about my future spouse through dreams. And I've met her and she fulfills everything. I grew up in a Christian family. And when I was 12 years old, God called me and told me, hey, you have amazing potential as a Christian. You haven't always lived up to that potential. Definitely had some ups and downs along the way, but when Christ plants the seed of the gospel in our hearts, that has, amazing potential to change a willing heart. Yeah, that's kind of my background.
So you've grown up in a Christian home. God had counted you at an early age, and you've been growing
Mm,
since then in your relationship with Him. I'd love to
mm,
hear, and I think you did share to some degree a bit about your journey with specifically this promise for kingdom marriage. And let me just pause briefly for
mhm.
anyone who has stumbled across this video, you don't know what kingdom marriage is. Essentially, to clarify, it's this idea that God brings two people together very specifically. This is the idea that God does have a choice of who you marry. And we believe this because God is a God of free will, and we do have the option to choose for ourselves what we do with our lives and who we marry and these types of things. But also, we have the opportunity that with our free will, that we can freely choose to allow God to be the one to arrange our marriages because we believe that God has the best understanding of what will be a blessing both for our lives and for our lives to be blessings to others in the future, especially when it comes to ministry, when it comes to serving God, and when it comes to being in a unified relationship that will bless others in the future by the ministry we can do much better together. So, Mitch, you've had a bit of an interaction with God over the years about this. Can you tell us where that started?
2019 was kind of in many ways where it started to, where I guess became aware of committing it to God. But actually, in reflection, I've noticed that the story actually goes back a little bit further than that. A little bit of context. In my younger years, had plenty of close female friends, but never seemed to have everything line up for a romantic relationship. And there was this one point in, I'm pretty sure it was 2016. And there was this one night I was just really crying out to God about like, is this pattern just going to keep going forever? Am I ever going to be able to, find someone and settle down? Or will it only just be like, friendship and friendship and friendship, which is like, not that friendship's bad, but it's like, does
You want
God
more?
have someone out? Yeah. Is that something I get to have? The thought kind of presented itself to me of just going through life, never, having that companionship that sticks around. That brought me to tears. And so I was just, crying out, like willing to give up anything if that might mean that I might, have someone. Like obviously not giving up God, but any means by which that was aligned with his will, then like I wanted to go down that way. And I made a promise. And at that time, I was like, I know I don't have the ability to keep this promise, right? But this is like my intent, right? And so I was saying, like, God, I will work tirelessly for you. I want my life to be in your hands, to do things for you, if me having a relationship can be part of that plan. But then fast forward to 2019. By that point, I'd already gone into a relationship and had that eventually fall apart. And this was definitely over, and didn't know what to do next. I realized that, hey, the way that I kind of, went about things, I was very much like just relying on my own ability to figure things out and, figure out, yeah, how to deal with it. There was one particular day in 2019 where it just became clear that, yeah, things with this girl, like they were over. They weren't gonna, come back together or anything. And God just like the best way I can explain it is like he picked me up in his arms and just like, I'll take care of you. And he
Mm.
gave me like all this support and community that I needed to get through at that time. That same day, that night, God impressed me to give a call to a good friend of mine. This friend called Lindsay, this crazy blonde lady. Um, And yeah, and we were just chatting and she was sharing about just this idea of God leading us in towards like marriage partners in this very specific and intentional way. And I was just impressed with the thought that maybe God has something like that for me. In many ways, that was a point at which I was open for God to really actually be leading me and for God to actually really be making this decision for me. And even though, beforehand I'd kind of, made this promise, like my heart wasn't really where I wanted it to be. I wasn't really, letting go of all my attempts to seize control there. But yeah, then 2019 I gave it into God's hands and yeah, amazing things started to play out from there.
Oh, thank you so much for that overview of your journey to that point. And yes, I remember you calling,
Mm,
and it was kind of out of the blue because I remember while you were in that previous relationship, you had a tendency to kind of fall off the face of the earth a little bit. And so we weren't quite as in touch as we had been up to that point. And I was like, oh, Mitch is calling. And
mm,
so we chatted, and I was going through a season where God had just started revealing to me about his plan for kingdom marriages for all sorts of people. So I was able to encourage you with that. And I'm so glad I was going through that season at that time, even though the person I thought I was going to marry back then totally didn't work out. He married somebody else. I had this whole other side story from yours where I was like, what is going on? But I'm glad that I was strongly believing at that point and was able to encourage you to believe
mm,
for that at that season in your life. It's just to
mm.
see the fruit of that since then. Okay, so you've come to this point where you're starting to believe that God has a plan for this specific area of your life. Then what happened?
It started off basically the first way I started, preparing for what's next was just writing lists. I had a list of what I was looking for, and I was like praying over this as I was thinking and writing these things out, right? Because I was like, I don't want just what I think is good, because I've tried that and I realized I really don't know what I want. And even having experience of having that first girlfriend, I was like, okay, I've seen a lot more about what relationships are like. They are more complex than I thought. It's not just, someone who's cute and will smile at you and laugh at your jokes, to be able to do life together with someone, like you need someone who's not just like a good human, but like a good fit for you. I was praying and writing out lists of what I was looking for. I was even like writing out a list of what I was hoping that she might be looking for that she would find in me. And to then also be praying about like, all right, God, help me to be the man that I'm supposed to be, right? God also started giving me dreams, and that was, a bit of a new thing for me at first. Yeah.
At this point, so God had never really given you a dream about anything in the past?
Not anything that I would have, yeah, thought of as God communicating to me through that. It's like a really interesting journey to be going through this and trying to figure out like what everything means, how it's going to play out. If you look in the Bible, there's like some stories where God reveals something saying like, hey, this is what's going to happen, and it's very like explicit and literal. And other times you have things like, the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation, where things like a lot more symbolic and they are
Yeah.
still very much meaningful, but they don't tell you like everything right up front.
Were any of your dreams literal, and were any of your dreams just symbolic?
Some were more literal, some were more symbolic. There
That's
was a
interesting.
bit of a spectrum there. I mean, again, none of the ones I've received are like super super literal, but this is I guess one of the easier ones to wrap our heads around, right? I don't know if I mentioned this in the last video. This one I was at like some kind of like gathering of people. And I was just dancing around with this girl, and I was having a nice time, like whatever. And then I noticed this particular girl sitting in the corner, and she was like upset and distressed, and my heart was like, I don't even know how to fully explain it, but I was just like drawn to her, and I just knew somehow that like she was the one for me, and I was like, okay,
Mm.
this is like what it's gonna be like to recognize her. And
Hmm.
there was a part of me, maybe it was a bit of pride that thought like, surely I'll actually recognize her when I see her, right? And she won't just be sitting in the corner crying or something. Then when we look at how it actually played out, yeah,
That sounds
I was
pretty accurate.
I wasn't literally, dancing, but I was chasing after this other girl, and I thought, oh yeah, she seems like she ticks enough of the boxes, right? And then in the midst of that, God, he drew my attention to the woman he actually had for me. And there was one point where, yeah, she was literally crying, and that was like literally a turning point in my heart, starting to figure out, hey, I don't want this woman to cry. I got to do
Yeah,
something about this. And
yeah.
all the, protective instincts and male protector role kind of stuff coming in, and realizing, oh,
Just
yeah,
ignited. Yeah,
maybe there's something to this.
yeah. Wow. That's really interesting that you mentioned that like that male protective sort of instinct coming to the fore. Because like I think we from what I've seen in the internet world around dating and everything, we talk about femininity and masculinity and things like that. But I only ever hear the feminine
Mm,
side of things. But it's really interesting to hear from your male perspective of what it's like for that to be ignited within you when you meet the right one. So thank you for sharing that. That's a really cool point. So when did you
yeah.
meet Jojo? What was the situation surrounding the meetings and how did it go from there?
So we first met in 2022 at a Christian conference called AYC. The first time we went to an AYC was because Lindsay kept going on about it, and I was like, maybe I should check this out. So it was at AYC. This was mid-year 2022. And this was just such a spirit-filled weekend. That Friday night was my first ever like all-night prayer, literally all-night praying. I don't know how I was still, functioning at all in the morning after, but
Yeah.
that was like a really special time. And then the Saturday night, they had like a prayer room set up at the back of the area that we were using for the conference. And yeah, had like a very special, very real prayer session with a group of guys in there, just yeah, talking about like real man issues in life. And
Yeah.
that was also like really cool. I was just really feeling the prayer this weekend, right? And then Sunday morning, there's one point where I was just really distinctly impressed by the Holy Spirit to go to the prayer room. And I was like, right, I know the prayer room. I've been there a bunch. I'm ready. Let's go. I went there, and I don't even know like what I was expecting to see. I popped my head in the door, and I saw, two people standing around by the entrance, but looked in and walked off because it just didn't click with what I was expecting to see. And then as I was walking away, the Holy Spirit was like, no, those two, they're the ones. You're there for them. And I was like, okay, I gotta do the embarrassing turn around and walk back in public thing, but whatever, I'll do it. Okay. And so I had to, have the awkward little turn around and come back thing. Yeah, I was just like, hey, can I pray for you guys for anything? And so this was Jojo and her daughter. And her daughter was sick, and this was, 2022, right? There was a certain disease going around, and people were worried about that. So it was quite a stressful thing to even just have like a regular degree of feeling a bit sick. Prayed for her daughter to get better. Found out later that day she had a nap, and after that she was good to go.
Naps fix
That
everything.
night naps fix everything. Yes. But yeah, that night we had a dinner together at like it was like a group thing at a friend's place, and I, heard that her daughter had gotten better. Somewhere along the line, one of us added the other on Facebook, but that was basically it for like, good like 6 months. And then that would bring us to the next chapter. I don't know if you want to go forward with that yet, but
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Now, if I'm correct, the next
Mm,
chapter was you about to begin to be a Bible worker in a local church.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
but before you could be a Bible worker, then what happened? What did you need to do?
So next. stage was start of 2023. I was, invited by my church to be a Bible worker for them, and as part of that, had a training program, a Bible school thing to go to. So that was about 3 months down in Melbourne. Jojo was also doing this Bible school, this Bible worker training. Yeah, I just saw her as, classmates, right? Over time, we did become quite close friends. I didn't see her as I didn't see her as like a romantic interest. I think something about the fact that, she already had like a daughter from, previous relationship. It didn't, click with what I was expecting to see. Or looking back in dreams, it's like, oh yeah, everything lines up and with where God was pointing me towards. We got to know each other through AFCO. That's the name of the Bible school. There was one point where her car broke down. So she lives in Melbourne and she was traveling from her place to where the training was happening. I was staying upstairs in the house where we had the training happening. And so her car broke down and she couldn't drive herself home. So she ended up staying in some, extra space downstairs, at where the training was happening. That evening, I was like, okay, well, okay, this friend of mine, her car's broke down. She's a bit stranded here. Okay, maybe I should come down and chat, right? Be a good friend. And yeah, came down. We hung out with one of the other guys that was staying there as well. And that was cool. And she appreciated that. And then in the morning, she needed to get somewhere to pick her car up from the mechanics where it had been towed. I think it was a Friday morning, and she called me up and was like, "Hey, can you come pick me up from this place? I'll shout you brunch if you pick me up." There's an offer of food in there, and even though I was really tired, I was like, food might lure me out of my cave. And we ended up having like a really good chat during brunch, and that was like not the only turning point, but just like yeah, one of these adventures along the way where we start to have these side adventures outside the context of our Bible school, and these kind of became more and more towards the end there, and somewhere along the line suddenly clicked, right?
You were chasing some other girl while you were at this
I
Bible
was
school.
chasing some other girl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember getting phone calls about this other girl and how that was all happening. And then all of a sudden, I had a phone call, and it was a very different girl that we were talking about. And I was like, hold on, where did this come from?
Yeah.
So tell us about that
Yeah.
moment.
So yeah, there was this other girl that I was interested in who was, I guess, yeah, just in certain ways, like closer to what I thought I was expecting, but I was wrong. That with this other girl, like, yeah, we would chat here and there, but we didn't spend time like outside of like our classes together. We didn't really have like that closer friendship developing there. Things really kind of came to start to make sense like right at the end of the 3 months. So we had our graduation ceremony on the Saturday, and then we had nothing, like we had nothing after that. So I had a few days to take my time on the trip back up. And so I was like, okay, I was spent 3 months with these people, it'd be nice to hang out and do something on like maybe on the Sunday before everyone's starting to part ways. But so I was just like open to, if people want to do something on the Sunday, I'll stick around for that. Otherwise, I may as well just start heading home, do it over a couple of days. There was like a, ongoing program that was running in Melbourne. It's called the 7 Habits of Effective People workshop, based on the book, just kind of, a workshop based of that to actually like apply, these habits and, support and encourage each other. By the end of the 3 months, I was just like, I'm not interested in that. I've sat in classroom well and truly plenty enough in the last 3 months. It's good stuff, but I can't fit anything more in there right now.
Yeah.
And this girl that I was chasing, she wanted to go to that. But even with me like knowing that she would be there, I was still like, yeah, nah. I'm not that interested. It still didn't click up here that hey, maybe I'm not as interested in her as I thought I was. But Jojo, the girl I'm engaged to now, she was like saying, maybe like because my nana lives about half an hour away from where we were staying then, and my nana's place is where I'm staying now. Crazy
Yeah.
story, but anyway, and she was suggesting, oh, maybe it would be good for you to, for us to visit your nana together again, before you leave. And I was like, yes, that would be good. And finally,
Dutiful grandson thing to do.
yeah, right. So this
Yeah.
woman is helping me to be a better family member to my family. Like, that's a good sign. You might not always think about it, but that's a good sign.
Mm.
And so yeah, she was like, "Oh, let's come, visit Nana." So he came along and visited Nana, and I think we made sandwiches for lunch. And then after that, we were, sitting around, had my ukulele, we were singing some hymns, and we were singing "It As Well With My Soul." And before we started singing, we were talking about the story. And as we were singing, like, me and Nana and Jojo, we were all getting emotional. And then Jojo was the one that just like burst into tears, and I was like, oh, she's just moved by the song. But then we started to click, hold on, maybe there's like more that's going on there than this. And my nana actually like, picked up. I was like, I think she might be sad that you're leaving, Mitch. And I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe. Maybe I should do
Oh,
something about that. And so I was like in this like weird situation where like I really valued her friendship. I didn't yet see her in that romantic way, but I was like, I can't just have her like heartbroken that her good friend is fleeing to another state, right? And I didn't want like her last memory of our time together to be like her crying and then me be like, all right, see ya. So
bye,
I was
Felicia.
just like, yeah, so I was just like, all right. I've just I've got to make this girl's day, right? I've got to give her like a good memory for this last time with us together. So that was really the turning point in my heart, right? So then we ended up yeah, going down to the waterfront and spending time there and basically telling each other our like whole life story, and it was,
Was that
yeah,
an
quite.
accidental date?
We call it our first date. We didn't plan it as a date, but it was like, yeah, this, looking back, that's a date. That's a date right there.
Yeah.
And we had dinner, and yeah, I got home kind of late that night, and yeah, the people I was staying with, they were like, "Oh, so you're just getting home now, and you spent the whole day with Jojo." Hmm. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what to make of this yet. As I was like saying goodbye to her, I was starting to feel like maybe I have feelings for her. What is going on in here? What's
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah.
And I was like super confused because because my mind was still, all the way back there thinking about this other girl and be like, oh, I'm supposed to be chasing her, right? But I'm not. What's going on? What's happening in my heart? What did I do? I turned to pray, and I was like, God, just open my heart to whoever my heart's supposed to be open to, and
Mm.
close my heart to whoever my heart's supposed to be closed to. And I was
Yeah.
fully expecting it to be like, Mitch, you're just going crazy. You just need a time out from women right now, right? Just shut these doors, just put that in a box, we'll deal with that later when you're, maybe a little bit more settled and well rested. So I prayed that. That's where my expectations were, right? And then all of a sudden I was like feeling even more warm towards Jojo. And I was like, I don't think that prayer worked. Okay, let's pray it again. Lord, open my heart to whoever my heart's supposed to be open to. Close my heart to whoever my heart's supposed to be open to. Oh no, my heart's even more feeling towards Jojo. And I'm even more forgetting about this other girl. All right, let's go a third time. Three times I prayed that prayer. And at the end, I was like, okay, okay. I think God's given me his answer, right? I don't understand it yet, but I think God's given me his answer. So let's go with that, and let's continue to pray, right? But let's see where this leads. The next morning I called her because she is a very caring person, and she was like, like, just call me before you leave, call me, like let me know like when you're stopping at places overnight, so I know you haven't crashed on the side of the road somewhere, right? Which is when you're doing like a big interstate trip, like that is a good concern to have about someone's safety, right? I called her before I left, but I was calling her like just before I left, after I'd already like packed everything into my car, after I'd gone to the supermarket to get like a couple of like last minute supplies for the trip. Because I was like, I'm really struggling with the thought of having to leave Melbourne where she is, right? Like my heart didn't want to leave. And I was still reluctant to even let her know what was going on down here because I was like, I'm still not like sure that I can trust that, right? I don't know that I can trust my feelings. We prayed together, and as I was like, she prayed first, and then I was praying. I gotta let her know like something about that. I have some feelings for her, right? I have love towards her. I don't know exactly what kind of love that is right now, but I have a this sensation, this principle of love towards her within me right now, and I can't just remain silent about this. So I did, yeah, let her know that, hey, I don't know exactly what this is, but there is something going on here. And at this time, I was like, look, I know that there's a lot of feelings there, but I just feel like I need some space to be able to process, to be able to think clearly. I had some good time in nature during this, couple days road trip and some good time just like listening to the Bible while driving. By the time I got back, I was like, look, I still don't have everything figured out, but like I think there's something happening here, and I think we need to, yeah, be, staying in touch and the stuff. That's the getting prepared for Bible work chapter.
With Bible working, you weren't really meant to be dating. That was kind of part of the agreement for that position.
I actually forgot
Sometimes
about that, but yeah, that was a thing.
there are some local churches that when they take on a Bible worker, they have an expectation that that person will be completely focused on ministry. And if you're not already in a relationship, they'd like you to stay that way until afterwards. Thank you very much. And so that's the kind of
Mm,
church that you were in at the time, which was
mm.
it was interesting for me to follow along the story, to be honest. So, very briefly, how did you manage that as you were getting to know Jojo and like ultimately what decisions need to be made from there?
When I agreed to be Bible working for my church, there were like there were only two conditions. And one of them was like, yeah, just don't get into a relationship while you're doing this. And like to be fair, I was a young person in a church that's based in university, right? Like it's like young people being surrounded by young people. Considering the sheer number of women I was speaking to on a day-to-day basis, I'm like, I am so glad I'm not going into this as like a, you know, single person with options completely open, right? Like that would have been just like so challenging, so much potential for conflict of interest.
And an abuse of your
As
power,
much
even.
as it was difficult for me to kind of respond to. I do think there is, a degree of wisdom to consider something like that in that context. But anyway, the two conditions was try and not get into a new romantic relationship at this time. And second thing was, to be continuing this Bible working for 1 full year. So that was like April to April was the, proposed time frame for that. That was like a full year for me to be interested in JoJo and not supposed to be in a relationship. So at the start, we were just like, all right, we're just friends. We're just like good friends getting to know each other, right? But there came a point where I was like, okay, clearly to anybody looking at what this situation is, you describe it as a romantic relationship, right? Like, even if we don't label ourselves as boyfriend, girlfriend, or don't publicly, use those words, right? Like that does describe what our relationship is. And I was like, okay, I need to talk to my church about this, right? And that was like a tense thing for me. So kind of like alongside all of this, I was also like struggling with like some health stuff and like energy levels and fatigue and stuff. And so that was already like on with Bible work, which is like a very intense kind of role where it's like, you're fully
Very
into
demanding.
ministry, right? Very, very demanding, right? Like all you can put into it is that what the job is. Yeah, I was just like, yeah, really like nervous about like, how this whole thing would go down. I ended up having to, have the conversations, having to make the phone calls I didn't particularly want to have to make to share with my church leadership about what was going on and also give them time to make a decision and make sure they were like following due process. As much as like I understand like the purpose of the process, it was still like stressful for me for me to go through. But also at the same time, I think the fact that we had to face these things as a relationship was like quite a strengthening experience as well, because it meant that we had to be like, all right, like I was in a position where I had to be like, all right, I care more about being in a relationship with you. I care more about who I can be in this role towards you than like my comfort, my staying within my comfort zone and not having to have the conversations that I would be happy to stay well away from, and having to kind of journey through these things together and think in my heart, is this worth it? Is she worth it?
Mm.
And yeah,
It's a
praise
very
the
like
Lord, she is
maturing
worth it.
experience.
Yeah.
So the challenge
But yeah, so
was
so so
helpful.
yeah, yeah. Like the book of James says, like, count all joy when you pass through various trials. And like that is still what the kind of, verse that I think I still like, oof, do I really have to count it as all joy always? I think it's a very like challenging verse that we have to take to God, but those trials definitely like strengthened our relationship, and I definitely count that as a blessing.
Hmm.
And yeah, when all was said and done, like, like my church was like supportive of like, this is a good thing, right? Like, we
I
want to
just
support you guys.
I just
And
want to
yeah.
pause there and comment for
Mm,
any girls who are out there listening to this. My friend Mitch is a man who fought for this relationship, and that's the kind of man that you want to have chasing you. If he is not fighting for you despite any obstacles that will come up in life naturally, then you don't want that person in your life. Like you want somebody who is committed enough and evaluating as he's going along and saying, this is still worth it to me. So thank you for being an example of that,
mm,
Mitch. That's really cool. Thank you.
praise God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where was I? Yeah. So in the end, yeah, they were willing for me to, continue to be a Bible worker and also be in a relationship. And then, later on, as we're getting towards the end of the year, I was like, all right, so we're doing this like whole like long distance thing, right? Like 1,000 kilometers between us. Like it's difficult to see each other. And like I just was wanting to plan, right? When can we be closer together? And we were considering, right? Does it make more sense for me to move down there to be closer to her, or for her to move up to where I was to be closer to for her to be closer to me? This was something that like took some time, took some prayer to make the right decision about. Like moving interstate is not a trivial decision for people in most situations. Yeah, we didn't want to just like rush through this decision, and also along the line of dreams. So there was a dream that I thought meant that she was supposed to move up to where I was, but also I had to bear in mind like, is this where the spirit's leading? Am I just taking my understanding of this thing that, if I'm being honest, like it's still like you're wrapped up in symbols that I might not have like the full grasp of, or like am I going to cling to that, or am I going to be open also to the other ways that God can communicate to us, to me. Because God knows, like, he chose me in my situation, he chose Jojo in her situation. Like, if there's something that clearly doesn't make sense according to, biblical counsel and how the Spirit's leading and answers to prayer, then, there might be reason to think, hey, maybe that dream doesn't mean what I think it means, or maybe I thought that dream was from God when it wasn't, or
Mm,
there could be some kind of confusion along those lines, right?
mm,
So this one, I guess, to briefly explain the dream, it was like, I was traveling along like a freeway, and met up with this girl, and then we're like traveling in convoy. Like this is just like the condensed version of it, right? And then there was a point where she was coming to where I was and like walking down the aisle, and I like not like in the church, but like walking down like this like aisle out in the woods or something. I don't know quite like how to express that. Anyway, without diving into like all the details, like I thought that meant, okay, the wedding's supposed to be up here. She's supposed to move up here, right? But there came a point where like it was just like clear, like, this like doesn't make sense according to everything else. And like the principles of God. Her daughter was down here, and going to school down here, and all of her friends are down here. Yeah, I just really didn't feel like I was in a position to force her to have to be moved away from all of
yeah.
this, but for the sake of someone she doesn't know or care about. Like, it just felt like, for her mum to be in a new relationship is enough already. Like it doesn't feel right to me to lay this on her. And as we continue to pray, yeah, we felt confirmation that like, yeah, I should be the one to move down. So tying into the, whole staying with my church for a year thing, yeah, I ended up feeling like if it's possible, I would like to discuss the possibility of moving down sooner. Like if I need to stay, the full time, like we can do that. But if I'm able to move down sooner, like I'd like to discuss what that's like. And the church leadership discussed it, and they were willing, like considering the circumstances, they saw this as a good thing. They're like, I think sometimes we get a bit scared when we're thinking like, oh, we gotta, bring this to the church board, and these people are scary. But then like when I think about it, it's like if I think about the board, that in my mind, like from like work experience, it just kind of like, has like negative connotations. But when I think about it, it's like, if I look at all the people on the board, like these are people who go to my church. These are my friends. I know these people. I know these are good people. They were happy for me to move down earlier, and they did. They didn't even require like so they paid for my Bible school course. They didn't even require me to pay back like the missing kind of investment they did there, but they did calculate out what that would be if in the future, I find it in my heart to repay that as an offering to the church, which I did end up doing because I felt like they were good to me and I wanted to return the favor by, supporting the efforts of the local church. But yeah, so I was able to move down early. So the two conditions of the contract I wasn't able to, to
Fulfill.
fulfill, but everything like worked out fine. Like,
This
God led and God blessed.
that's a
And
divine
and then
interruption right there.
yeah, and then even like thinking about that dream that I thought meant she was supposed to come up to me, like this morning I was like looking back at that and I was like, hang on. Like this doesn't show her going north. This shows her like, being from the freeway and going left. And so it's like, okay, so the freeway is, Melbourne to New South Wales, right? Left from there means west. And I'm currently living like about an hour west of her. And I'm like, hang on, hang on. This is actually saying I am west of her when we're
Hmm.
coming to the point where we're getting married, when she's walking down the
Wow.
aisle. And I'm like,
Such
wow,
intricate detail.
yeah.
That's so cool. Very good.
So yeah, when that clicked, I was just like, man, like God knew all along exactly what he had planned.
And that's really cool because when you look back, I'm guessing there are still moments of difficulty and perhaps uncertainty along the way on occasion, just that
Mm,
crop up when the enemy is trying to discourage you and things like that. But when you
mm,
are able to look back and reflect on those dreams and reflect on what God showed you long before anything actually took place, you can encourage yourself by saying, hey, no, this is definitely still part of God's plan. He saw this, he sees the
mm,
end from the beginning. That is so
mm,
cool, so encouraging. God knows what you will need 2 or 3 years from now, and He'll give you that encouragement now to reinforce that in the future. The Bible tells us that God gives prophecies so that we are able to trust Him when we see them fulfilled. So
mm.
that's really cool to see how that has played out in your life already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing the story to this point. What do you think will be something that you and Jojo will do when you are married as like ministry together? What are you doing in ministry together
Mm.
now, and where do you see that potentially going in the future?
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways in which I see our roles in ministry combining. So what we are currently involved in ministry together. So we're both actively involved in our local church, right? Like I think that's a really important place for ministry to start. So our church has care groups, small groups that meet on a regular basis, and we're both, quite involved in that. And in, following up with people who are studying the Bible with, who are leading towards Jesus. We do like we visit people together, we yeah, catch up with people together. Our church runs health programs to, help people to see like, hey, Jesus is a healer. He still cares about our health. And that's actually something that like I want to be, yeah, sharing more about online as well.
Hmm.
Looking forwards. But yeah, so we're involved in that. Like I'm not from like a health professional background or anything, so I'm more just kind of come at this from like a facilitator role, and Jojo as well. But this is something we are, quite invested in, because like, especially from like, what I was, mentioning before about how I was, facing health challenges during my Bible
Mm.
work. Like it really helped me to seek, all right, does God have answers for our health? And yes, he does. And sharing that with people, I think, is a really important thing. It's a really important way to meet people's needs and help them to see, hey, like Jesus actually cares about, my pain, or my, depression, or my, physical, mental, whatever health problem, right? So those are like, yeah, some things we're currently involved in. Moving forward, so I guess one thing that's kind of a current plus moving forward thing is, yeah, I also have a YouTube channel where I share like music and, yeah, Bible teachings and stuff, that is currently called Mitchell Wallace, and it's mostly just me. But moving forward, I'm looking to be more collaborative with that, to do more,
Yeah.
things like, this interview with Lindsay, right? To be having more, guests on the channel,
Cool. So
and
for anyone listening,
and
please go and check out Mitch's YouTube channel. What was it called? Mitchell Wallace.
yeah, currently it's just called Mitchell Wallace.
Okay.
Moving forward, I am planning to update the name and the branding to reflect the fact that it's not just Mitchell Wallace. So the
Sure.
plan at
So
this
I'll,
stage is to go with the name Moved by the Word, partly because then we can still have like a MW in the logo and have like that
sure.
branding transition.
Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense. But
Yeah.
anyway,
So
so yeah,
I'll get the
that's
link for that and put it in the comments below so that anyone who wants to follow it at any time in the future, no matter when you're watching this video, no matter what the branding is at the time, you'll be able to click that link and you'll be able to go to it. So we'll pop that
yes.
in there for you.
Thank you. We have a little bit of, content on there with me and Jojo together. There's a song that we recorded together, and there's an interesting story behind that song that we made a video about. Basically, yeah, God impressed me to write a song that actually like hinted at attributes of me and Jojo together without me having any clue about what that was doing. So
Wow.
that's cool. We'll be sharing some more things about our story on my channel as well. She's a graphic designer, and graphic design and thinking visually is not something that's my strength. And so yeah, she's been a great blessing. For yeah, over a year now, she's been using her, design talents to make the thumbnails for my channel a whole lot better than they used to be. So she brings the graphic design to the table. She's a little bit, camera shy, but she knows her Bible well. She believes the Bible. She's very prayerful. And so we'll see how we can, have her involved in the channel. And also, even in a professional sense, right? God's lined up our skills and talents. So
I was just thinking that, yeah.
I at uni I did software development, computer science. My kind of focus is on web development and making websites, more so from like, the, most technical side, moving towards the bits that people see. Whereas Jojo also, like, from her include under the graphic design umbrella, does web design, and has built websites in WordPress using like more like, visual based editors. And so, with our skills together, we can, yeah, we have started working on websites together for people. So I don't know, can I plug our
Yeah,
our
go for it.
thing for that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
So we've got eFodstudio.com. Check that out. That's like our kind of brand for web development and stuff. So yeah, we're hoping that maybe at some point that can become kind of a larger chunk of our, professional side of things, because, then by having this as like our own business, then we are, f like more free to, share about faith, and like, pray for our clients, and make this a ministry thing as well. Like Paul was a tent maker. He was ministering to people while he was making tents. And
yeah.
Jesus was a carpenter until he was like 30, right? And you think, okay,
Hmm.
he was Jesus, right? He was 100%, like ministering to people while he was doing that. And so
Hmm.
like a lot of the times when we think about like what it means to be doing ministry, we just think, oh, that just means like being like a pastor or something, right? And for some people, that's what it is. But for other people, like, yeah, it might look like making tents, it might look like making websites.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another thing that we do together. I think
Is there
that's probably
anything
like,
else?
most of the main points. Um,
Okay,
it
so great.
sounds like a lot that there's, yeah, yeah.
So you're aligned with your, I guess, secular work that you would be doing.
Mm,
You are aligned in the spiritual ministry that you do in a local church setting, the interests that you
mm,
have. I'm not sure if you're still doing it, but I think at one point you were telling me you guys were involved in the children's ministry at your church or something like
mm,
that
yeah.
together. And so this is what we mean about kingdom marriage is working together, having complementary qualities in each person, maybe not the exact same qualities, but maybe similar or different enough to be helpful to each other and helpful for the overall
Mm,
mission. So whether that comes in the of making money together or making disciples together, working together is what we're looking for in a unified front. Okay, so thank you for sharing that. I think just for our final question, do you have
mm,
anything that you'd like to say to single people or perhaps people who are dating and wondering if this person is the one from God? Any suggestions on waiting or preparing well for God to lead these people into a kingdom marriage?
mm. So I'd say the biggest point. So like disclaimer, I don't really like watch a lot of the kingdom marriage type stuff online, but yeah, just there are some people who might have this concept that the one looks similar to what the Hollywood, romance movies tend to make it out like, like you don't have to change anything about yourself. You don't have to work hard. It's just, easy breezy, feels good the whole time. And yeah, biblically, that's not what this is. Like my advice would honestly be like stop watching all those movies completely because in all honesty that will distort your view of what a real relationship should look
Yeah.
like. And even if you think like, oh, like I don't like agree with all the stuff I'm seeing, right? But like it still like goes into your brain. Like there's
Yeah.
a
And
reason
your
they do
brain can't,
product placement.
yeah. And your brain
Yeah,
can't
there's a reason
actually
they do product placement.
identify your brain can't actually identify the things that come into your senses, your eyes, your ears. It can't identify whether that is real or whether that's fake. It just knows it's in there.
Mm,
It's the part of the algorithm in your head, the programming in your head. If we're using these technical kind of
mm,
social media or software kind of words, right? Your brain
mm,
just soaks it all in like a sponge, and then it just spits out in your character, in your personality, in your expectations that, hey, what I've seen must be true. That must be
mm.
something I'm looking for. So you're saying to detox from that kind of false
Yeah.
information, and to, I guess, allow the Holy Spirit to renew you by renewing your mind. How can we do that? How can
Mhm.
we renew our mind as far as true godly relationships?
So I'd say, yeah, don't just take something out of your life. Like, Jesus says, like, if the house that was once filled with, evil spirits, right, like, is then, empty and swept clean and nothing's in there, then they'll just come back even worse. Like, you need to it's a principle that when we take something out of our life that's not good for us, we need to put something good in that place. And so I would say, like, yeah, that time that you're taking out from the entertainment that's not going to be helping your perspective be where it should be. Instead, replace that with time in prayer, time in God's word, time in sharing Jesus with people, and spend time like reading about relationships in the Bible. Like we can start with Genesis. God literally made Eve for Adam. They were in a
Mm,
perfect garden, right?
mm,
And then the very next chapter, they're blaming each other. Like I think that's a very grounding thing in perspective of what it means when you meet the one who is literally perfect for you. God made them just for you. That doesn't mean that you won't have disagreements. That doesn't mean that, you
Sinful
are
human
unable to
moments.
make the wrong choices. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
So how can we
it's
manage
very
those
important to be.
moments? Yeah.
Mm, so it's very important to be, yeah, um, aligning your perspective with where it should be, because these misleading concepts that are, not grounded in God's word, like they're going to be weights that weigh you down in this journey. And Hebrews 12, says like lay aside every weight, right? All these things are going to hold us back. So that would be like, I guess, where I'd say to start. And then the second thing I would say is, yeah, kind of building off of that, right? On like the human moments, right? That we have to fight against. You will have to fight against the flesh and fight hard if you want to stay together with the person
Mm,
God chose for you. Like
mm,
there'll be times that it will be amazing. Don't get me wrong. There'll be times you'll be like, why would I want anybody else in the world? But there will also be times where you will feel hurt or mad or miserable, or it just feels like it's too much for you to take on to love this person the way you're supposed to. And like you need to learn to overcome those temptations to be unloving, those temptations to walk away from the person that you are called to be a blessing to. Because kingdom marriage is not just, you being called to be blessed. No, it's like in my experience, it's more about the calling to serve. And that
mm,
is in itself a blessing. Um, and like when we have these moments, like I would say like memorize Bible texts, right? They are
mm,
like it's not about like having, like memorizing everything. That would be cool if you could, but like having something that you can pull up and be like, all right, I'm facing this temptation, and what can I use? First Corinthians 10:13 that says whatever temptation we're facing, God will make a way of escape.
mm.
You claim that with faith. God will make a way of escape. Okay, God, I'm ready for whatever your way of escape is. And that might not be what you want it to be. That might be calling you outside your comfort zone. But when you believe that God will make a way of escape, and you cling to that and you seek for that, God will lead you to overcome these barriers, right? Because Satan doesn't want you to be with her. Satan doesn't want you to be with him. Satan doesn't want these kingdom marriages to work out. He will
Yeah.
try and separate you. He will try and make you mad at each other. And we need to be able to fight those temptations. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say those are probably the two main pieces of advice. But I would also say it's important for us to just have just generally speaking, have that relationship with Jesus, that we
Mm,
can really trust that he knows what's best for us.
mm.
He knows things about ourselves that we don't have the faintest clue about. Like, yeah, there are things about Jojo that like I don't even know how to put this, but it's like if I could just like have my choice to just like look around and at like what I'm able to see and choose who I think would be good, like I probably wouldn't have chosen her, and I would have been missing out because
Mm.
God saw things that I didn't see.
Right.
God saw away things about how our personalities fit together, how our gifts and talents complement each other that I wouldn't have been able to perceive. God
Yeah.
understands what will satisfy like the longings of our heart in a way that we aren't able to perceive. And like I think it's important to understand that like having like a surface level relationship with someone is very different to being like their life partner. Like
Mm.
that you see sides of them that you don't see when you're just like dating or just like meeting people. And
On
so
your
you
best
you don't
behavior.
know. Yeah, like you might say, oh, like this little part of the jigsaw puzzle, this looks like it fits into my puzzle piece, but actually you zoom out a little bit more, it's like actually no, there's other parts that don't fit very well.
Yeah.
And so having that trust that God actually knows better than you, that even
Mm.
when it actually doesn't make sense to you, that you will trust in God anyway. I think, yeah, that trust relationship is really important, and not just in like kingdom marriage, not just in you know any specific thing, but just generally in life. Having that trust that like, yeah, God, I know that your thoughts are higher than mine, and I know that you are infinitely wise. Help me to trust you. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that encouragement, for sharing a story, for sharing your advice and your wisdom from your lived experience in this so far. And thank you so much, just yeah, for sharing the fruit of what can happen when we trust in God for kingdom marriage or for any area
Mm.
of our life that He wants to be invited into for each of us. So there's like 8 billion people on this planet, I think. And if every person had this kind of faith and trust in God and gave their lives over to God and gave this specific area over to God, God would have a specific plan for every single person on the planet, for
Mm.
their marriage, for their ministry, for their fulfillment in life in general. And this invitation is for anybody out there who is watching, who is listening. Um, you can have this too. If you choose to give your free will, to give out of your free will, God access into this part of your life, into this part of your heart, God will make the broken pieces of your life and the broken pieces of another person's life, and He'll bring them together into something beautiful and something that brings a glory to Him and healing and joy for each other. So thank
Mm.
you so much for joining me here on the show today, Mitch. It's been a real blessing and a real pleasure. Um, is there any final thing that you'd like to say?
Not really, just yeah. Thank you for having me on here. And it's yeah, I am blessed to be able to do this interview. And yeah, just share of what
I'm
God's
glad we
done
could
in my
finally make
life.
it happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
This has been long in the making. So, okay, thank you so much for joining us together. And I just like to encourage you all once more to go follow Mitch's social media and his go check out his website. And thank you so much for joining us today. God bless you, and may God keep you and make his face shine upon you and give you peace. We will see you again another time. Bye.